Heavy is the hand that wears the crown.
Another video. We actually got another one today in terms of the workshop title. I know, I still haven't actually given a title to any one of these videos, but we do got another debunk. And it's going to be one of my most controversials, and I'm most likely going to get a lot of hate. And obviously there's going to be a lot of people who disagree. And then because, once again, as I do go after a lot of times bigger channels, not purposefully, it just happens to be that I disagree and thought it was worth making a video topic on it, and I don't really care whether you're smaller than me or whether you're bigger than me as a channel. If you say something dumb or something untrue or something that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense that I feel is worth making a topic point in terms of a video, then I'm going to simply do it regardless of any disparity between us. And I don't even hate a lot of the people that I go after. In fact, a lot of people that I have went after I actually do like. Some of them I'm even subscribed to, or I follow them, and I can respect a general lot of their opinions. But in this case, I do have to come and combat. I have not really seen any videos from this guy other than just this one. It happened to be really drawing me in because of the title and the fact that they were discussing a webtoon comic that I had not actually read myself, but thought was kind of interesting from just the look of it, because I had seen the artwork going around on other social media sites. So I thought I might want to check it out one day. I just never really got around to it, and I saw this guy talking about it and basically pointing out the idea that it was awful. And for the most part, up until this point in the video, I actually was agreeing with him, just based off of the standard of what was put into the video and presented as evidence that I can simply just look at on the screen. And I would have to deny reality in order to be able to ignore. If you see what I'm getting at here, it's because he kind of does the same thing. Now, I get his overall complaint when it comes to the structure of harems and harem animes and things of that nature. However, what I am going to disagree with him, and this is why I said it's going to be super controversial for me to do this, is because of how everyone's opinions is on this, but my opinion is a bit more loose. I am somewhat aware of the flaws and somewhat aware of the criticisms, and do have a lot of criticisms for this show myself. However, where I fundamentally disagree with this guy is because he's just ignoring objective reality to suit his own subjective opinion and need, so it can fit into his narrative. Which, again, there's nothing necessarily quote-unquote wrong with that. However, what comes to be the problem is when you try to take your subjectivity and turn it into objectivity. When you are just objectively wrong about something, it's best that you have the time to yourself to look over your script and then essentially rewrite it. Take out that part. I would have had no issues if he had just stuck to the idea, and the anime we're talking about here is Redo of a Healer. I'm pretty sure you guys all know about Redo of a Healer at this point. Everyone and their mama kind of knew about Redo of a Healer, and it's subsequently been buried under the rug, which, thankfully, I don't think that's hurt his chances in having a resurgence. I still personally want a season 2, and I've been actually reading the manga myself and going forward. I actually even saw a video on it from the creator in regards to him. I think he was doing an interview with the anime man. Excuse me. I think he was doing a video with him, and so I basically kind of watched a little bit of that and got into a little bit more of his reasonings for creating it. However, I know a lot of people tend to deem this as softcore porn, and whereas I can kind of see that argument and not going to sit there and hark on that, my point is what he thinks the structure of the story is about is what I have to complain of. Like I said, I've never seen BlackLightJack until this point. However, we're going to sit here and get into the points that he makes in regards to Redo of a Healer, specifically the part that I'm criticizing and debunking him on, and kind of showcase to you guys where he goes wrong.
For Christ's sake, even Kaoru from Redo of Healer, an anime that is just nothing but edgelord BS,
boy, that escalated quickly,
has these cheap excuses to soften the blow.
You little pussy.
Now, to kind of address some of the context of the idea of what he's talking about in regards to these quote-unquote excuses, he's referring to the idea that harem anime tend to have excuses that range between BS to middling, or even rather non-existent when it comes to justifying a lot of the more verbose actions that their main characters may take in regards to the harem itself or the women around them. Now, necessarily, I would disagree in the whole idea that this is the majority of harem, because actually the majority of harem has the exact opposite. The vast majority of harem involves around the male fantasy towards an average guy who's a weakling, who's sorry, he's definitely pretty terrible, but he may be horny, like I said, he's pretty much average. He's just kind of a guy who wants to get girls, but doesn't appeal to women, as a lot of the Giga Chads tend to do. And so, some reason, he now has this mysterious ability or power or some personality quirk, even though it's oftentimes generic or not really thoroughly explained, that he's attracting a whole bunch of women. And that is pretty much, I would say, 95% of all harem anime. However, I get the overall context of what he's going for, especially if you guys will go and watch the video yourself and see the webcomic that he's talking about. You will understand why I'm not going to harp on him for him making the distinction here, because I would somewhat agree. However, I do not agree that the 99% of them are making up these excuses, nor do they have these quote-unquote excuses as he's putting. Something to soften the blow, as he would say. Something to kind of like mitigate how awful the main protagonist is, because reasons?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very unclear as to what he really means by softening the blow, or what he defines as excuses, because he does kind of give an example. However, it's not really a necessarily good one that thoroughly explains it. I get the general gist of what he's going on about. However, it's not really all that fleshed out. Nevertheless, the part of his first point here that I won't harp on too much, because I do basically put it into the idea that it is mostly subjective, is his consideration of the anime, basically saying that it's just edgelord BS. Now, I disagree with that.
What? What the fuck?
Okay, and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and quote-unquote debate people on that. Again, that's my opinion, and it's fine for me to have that opinion. It's fine for everyone else to have a differentiating opinion. I think 99% of people who have ever seen this anime or who's ever talked about it would disagree with me on that and say that it is super edgy, it's edgelord nonsense or whatever. And that's fine, but I'm not one of those people. I do have my reasons, but that's not what I'm trying to get into here. So, because I'm basically saying that I'm not harping on this guy for that. My problem and his first point comes with the idea of excuses. But like I said, the idea of his excuses aren't as well defined in terms of what he's qualifying for that. This is mainly due to the fact that I don't really consider a lot of Kuritsugu's actions as excuses. In regards that even the anime itself and the manga will educate you on the idea that you are not meant to quote-unquote view him as the protagonist. You are not meant to take him in the sense that he is this upholding standard of hero, because by natural right of being the main character, he is therefore defined as the protagonist. However, what I mean when I say that, when I say you're not meant to view him as a protagonist, you're not meant to view him as a quote-unquote justifiable character, in the sense that you can understand and empathize with his actions, but you cannot sympathize with them because of the approach that he takes. Rather than going to seek help, or even when he had another chance at life, tried to make a betterment of it, to get away from the society that torments him, he decided to go on this crux of revenge. And that is really what the main bulk of the story is about, his quest for revenge, and how it ultimately alters and changes his character to make him a better person. It's trying to put him on this path for redemption, but there are a lot of hiccups and stumbles. If you only watch the first season of the anime, you're going to recognize that there's a lot of those elements in there, and that is what they're trying to convey to you. That's what they're trying to get across to you. Thus, you can actually understand and, like I said, empathize with his character. There's a lot of growth and potential there for him to become a better person overall, and that he's not entirely irredeemable even at the start of it, because you understand that what he went through can push anyone to an extreme. It is not unlikely that most people who were put in the same situations would not do exactly the same things that he did. Now, there are some people who won't, some people who will. It just really all depends on how much will you want to push towards it. His will was strong enough to carry him through, and once he managed to gain his sanity back, he immediately went off the deep end. Again, this doesn't mean that he is justified in turning into a cruel turning into a just as cruel, if not even crueler monster than his oppressors. Again, those actions that are taken are not being said to be okay. They are being recognized as just the vehicles and tools of his revenge. And so therefore, I do not believe that the verbiage nor labeling this under the banner of excuse is all that appropriate. Just going based off of the most accurate interpretation and definition that I personally can go for when revolving around the idea of an excuse, because it's not really excusing anything. The manga and anime do not excuse his behavior to a point to where you can simply label it as them trying to soften the blow with said excuse, because they make it very clear that the actions itself are wrong, and they make it very clear that there are things that he could have done more appropriate in order for him to not be sitting here and putting himself within the position of becoming more cruel than, once again, the oppressors who essentially drove him to this state in the first place. But like I said, this first point I won't hark on too much, because even in my rebuttal just now, it is mostly based off of my own interpretation and opinion of the series itself. And I've already acknowledged ad nauseum about the differences between me and what I believe about 99% of the people who know about this anime and manga would suggest, at least in regards to the protagonist of Redo of a Healer.
The anime at its core is just about a guy that abuses and mistreats girls.
Are you fucking high?
And does offensive stuff, and that's literally just it.
Could you run that by me again?
And does offensive stuff, and that's literally just it.
That's what I thought you said. Now let me offer this as a rebuttal.
Wrong!
But the reason why he is doing that is because in the past, all these girls mistreated and abused him first.
Yes, I love it! He's got nothing!
So this entire anime is just one big dumb revenge story.
So this entire anime is just one big dumb revenge story.
Now the next point here is the reason for my opening monologue when I described him as essentially denying reality and objective fact to suit his own narrative and means. And where I want to separate the idea of subjectivity from objectivity, because he is objectively wrong about the core of quote-unquote the anime and manga's representation. Keep in mind the idea that it's really his connotation and verbiage and state of fact that is really what I'm calling into question here. And the only reason I'm even bringing up the point that I say he essentially denying reality in order to suit that narrative, because he puts it as a point of a state of fact, as though this is not his opinion, this is just what something is. Again, that is what the verbiage seems to indicate. And like with every debunk video that I've ever done, I always look ahead into the video or watch ahead before I even go forward in making these, because I want to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. And if he had made some clarifications, which he doesn't, then I wouldn't be making this video at all. So in other words, he truly believes that at the core of Redo of a Healer, this is what it's about, when this is just simply not true. You can easily look this up by merely looking at the summary of both the anime and the manga, but I don't want to sit there and go as simplistic as he does and make that to be what it is all about. I'll go a little bit deeper actually, which in this case just means expounding upon said summary and expressing why he is objectively wrong, because at Redo of a Healer's core, it is nothing to do with abusing women. Women specifically never really come up as an idea of an abuse term. He seems to forget that it was also men who abused him too. In fact, in Kirigu's case, he was abused by pretty much the entirety of the kingdom, with very few people from his select go-around of the first time he actually went through this having not actually abused him. He was abused by both men and women, tortured, humiliated, and raped by them. And so for Black Light to simply put a lens on the idea that it was a gender thing, as though he purposely went out his way to grab the women a part of his harem to specifically abuse them, especially in the way that he is describing this quote-unquote character who he's making the comparison to, the Princess's Jewels or whatever, is at best disingenuous and at worst downright facetious, because it's just simply inaccurate. At the core of Redo of a Healer, it is not about whether or not he can go out there and abuse women. It is about revenge. It is the purest definition of an extremity when it comes to the revenge genre, because he went through this. And again, he suffered abuse on both sides from both genders, so it's not a gender thing. That is strictly what BlackLightJack is simply trying to put it to. And he is lying to you when he says that, because that is simply not true. Any one of you who has ever seen the anime would know that he was also abused by men. It has nothing to do with women, and at no point, when it comes to the women that are his paramour and are in his harem, does he go out of his way to actually abuse them or humiliate them to such a degree that it can be even remotely compared to the character he's talking about from this webtoon. Especially in the way that he is describing it, it never comes up, with the only exception, but even then, it's not really in the same line of thinking, because he turned this character from one point to another. So Freya is the big switch here. He turned her into an entirely different person who he goes out of his way to not only comfort and protect, but doesn't actually abuse her. And oftentimes when it comes to the depiction of the anime or manga, it is expressed to the idea that he actually cares for them. He may use some quote-unquote offensive language, or he may use some quote-unquote objectified language. However, as basically shown and pointed out, as we get to see into his psyche, he actually does care for them. So much so that his enemy who tortured him, who he finally got the one up on, rather than keep into the same line of what he originally did by altering her personality and manipulating her and turning her into Freya, instead, he actually forms an attachment with her, an attachment to an extreme, and he begins to question this himself. As you can see, his character is evolving. But guess what? At no point do they talk about it in the terms of abusing women. They talk about it in the terms of his revenge is evolving. Now, of course, he does express some things, and in the beginning, you can say that he is basically, but again, it's just with her, but you can basically express the idea that he wants a slave that he can manipulate and control in his own way, but he turns away from this. And at no point does any other girl he accepts under his purview become this. Again, the expression of their language is a bit different, because they have formulated these quote-unquote bonds and familial ties with each other, and he treats all of them with respect and care. And at no point does he go out of his way to purposely humiliate them or threaten their families or say that he would quote-unquote castrate them and stuff like that, because he brings this up as a big problem with the other protagonist that he's trying to compare this to. He's trying to add some levity here, but he's just wrong in what the actual depiction of the anime and manga is about. He's trying to say that Redo of a Healer at least softens the blows or quote-unquote gives excuses. He does not really clarify or put out or flesh out what those excuses are, but at the same time, he then is just objectively wrong about what it's about. And in fact, the only quote-unquote women that he continues to abuse or torture throughout the series are women who did him wrong. Again, it's not justifying those actions, but it is saying that he actually has reasons. He actually does have quote-unquote solid justification in the sense of pursuing his actions, although the actions themselves are not justified, because there's always a better way or a more peaceful way that he could have chose. Exposing them and things of that nature could have worked too, maybe build a kingdom of his own. But again, this is stuff he has to learn along the way, and he still struggles as a character because he turned into what he hated. That is what it's about. It is a revenge story. It is him redoing his life from the shithole that it was the first time around to trying to become this quote-unquote evil person in order to get revenge and stop the corruption of the kingdom. Because keep in mind, sure, there are other ways that he could try, but let's be honest here. Considering how far the corruption goes and how deep it goes, if he had tried to pursue it through a political or legal means, most likely it would not have worked out, especially when he had the chance to redo it all. There would have been no evidence whatsoever that these people were like this. And sure, you can argue that he still goes in there and gets the evidence, but here's the thing. For a fact, most of the kingdom knows that there are a lot of people who are quote-unquote evil, people who are a lot of debauchery. Sure, the main 4 people that he's going after, you know, they're looked at as heroes. You can understand why they're looked at as heroes, but a lot of the other corruption in the kingdom, everyone knows about and would be easy to expose. A lot of people on the street suffer it. He has to experience all this and see how much the kingdom is oppressing its natural people around. This is how he tends to get a lot of the crowds on his side. So what I'm saying is, it's just simply not the case that this is about abusing women at its core. And again, you may hear certain language, and I can't press this point enough, but we know for a fact that it's simply not true in terms of the overall feeling or intent that goes behind it. And even then, that language isn't always expressed. And before somebody tries to argue the nonsense of the idea that, oh, well, he has sex with them a lot, isn't that abuse? That's just absurd and ridiculous. Every girl in there is consenting. They're not being manipulated into sleeping with him, okay? They're all consenting. And even when it's looked at as some of his actions, because he's very truthful with them, he's very plain with them. If he says he's going to go out there and kill somebody and stuff like that, they're very open and understanding of this. Even if it's like, oh, he's going to sleep with another woman just because he wants to sleep with her, they're very understanding and open to this, and they accept it. They consent. They're not being manipulated. They're not being forced into it. And to also go on, he basically acknowledges the idea that it is a revenge story, which contradicts his narrative and point. The fact that he does not see that doesn't really make sense to me, because it's so blatantly obvious. He's not going at women because women did him wrong. He's getting revenge on people in general who did him wrong. If he hadn't simply made that correction and then said it was a revenge story, again, I wouldn't even be making this video, because I would have been like, oh, that's fine, fair enough. I mean, sure, he may be using simplistic terminology, but that's fine, because that's really probably not the main point of his video. He's just simply making a comparison. So that would have been fine. He just blatantly makes a wrong statement and tries to pass it on as reality or fact. Because yes, it is true that there were women who abused him. That is true. And he does in turn abuse certain women back. However, this is not because, quote unquote, they're women. It has nothing to do with their gender. It's not because he wants to abuse and beat up on women because women hurt him and therefore he's some type of incel simp or some type of male feminist because women mistreated him, therefore he's got to beat up on women because their gender is evil. That's not what this is about. Because both men and women abuse him. At no point does it become a gender thing. And he's not abusing or mistreating the quote-unquote women under his purview. He doesn't bring them into the fold because, oh, he must abuse women because women abuse him. Because that's what, that's what Blacklight is essentially saying. Okay, that is what he is saying. He is stating that all the women under his harem are that way because that is the comparison that he's making. That is the point that he's making here with the comparison. And so that's where he gets this wrongful interpretation from. And so he's basically saying that, oh, because women abuse him, therefore he's going to have sex with a bunch of women so he can abuse them. He's going to bring them into his harem so he can abuse them. And he just ignores that that's not what happens at all. That's not the purpose of bringing in a lot of the women that he brings in. He does have purpose for them, but that's not really abuse. Saying that, ooh, they can help him meet his goals. That's not abusive. And again, I want people to understand, which is why I'm putting these terms and definitions up on screen as we talk about them. Please learn what the terms abuse and things of that nature mean. Because that's not abusive. It's not the same thing. He didn't grab his harem. He didn't get a harem because he wanted to abuse women. He got a harem because he wanted to essentially use every single solitary one of his tools that were available to him to help get his revenge. These women happen to offer that. They happen to offer him a pathway to get his revenge. His personal feelings on them are actually all quite different. And in fact, one of the ladies that he has under his harem was essentially the final boss of his last life. And in terms of, it's not that he can't use her, but he doesn't really have a general use on her. He wants to protect her because of what the kingdom did to her. He saw her life, he saw what happened that turned her into said monster, or that could have had a potential outcome, and realized that they are very much similar in that way. And so he wants to protect and fold her in. Now, sure, it doesn't mean he can't use that to his advantage, but at no point, really, at least, and I'm strictly going off of most of the anime, because I think that's what most people have seen. I think people have read the manga. But in terms of the anime, he's not really trying to get at her to the point to where it's like, I just need to use her. So even that's not true, that he always needs to have a use to them in order for him to be a part of, in order for them to be a part of his harem. So it just goes to show you that this is not really an apt comparison necessarily. And it just really denies reality to suit a narrative. To make it all very clear, it's not about that. It is not about some guy who wants to abuse women because he was abused by women and therefore has this incel beta rage against all women. It's just simply not that. But again, I'm not going to harp on him too much because I understand where he's coming from. And if he doesn't like this anime, that's perfectly fine and natural. I'm not criticizing him for his distaste in this anime. I was only correcting the idea that he was getting something objectively wrong and trying to pass it off as an objective fact when it just simply wasn't. If it had been stated to the idea of, oh, it's just my opinion, that's not what this is about. It's what I think this is about. If he had said something to the effect of that, or this is what I believe it's about, and not made it a statement of fact, then again, this video would not be existing right now. But yet, here we are, and it does. And so that's basically it. Another one down the drain. And with that being said, my Gummy Knights, I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.
To all my Gummy Knights, new and old, just remember, this is a man's world, but it would be nothing without his brain and his bronze. And lying is indeed the most fun that a woman can have, without taking off her clothes. Good night.